An Assyrian envoy walks into a harbor office in Tyre, probably expecting fear. The man behind the ledger keeps writing. He's bent over a wax tablet, bone stylus moving fast, and tucked under his left arm is a roll of papyrus, edges dark with cedar resin, columns of tight, angular script running top to bottom. Inventory tallies for a single cargo bound simultaneously for 3 different kingdoms. He finishes the line before he acknowledges the envoy. Not rudeness, calculation. In this city, the man who moves first loses ground. Outside the window, the harbor of Tyre is already loud at dawn. 40 ships, maybe more. Cedar from Lebanon, glass from the furnaces up the coast, bolts of cloth so deeply purple they look almost black in the morning light. The envoy has come because his emperor wants tribute. Again. The man sets down his stylus. He picks up the papyrus. He begins to negotiate. And here's what you need to understand about this moment. The empire sending that envoy no longer exists. But the papyrus does. The city is gone, but the alphabet scratched into that clay, that survived everything. The trade route that cargo traveled, it still exists, in a different form, right now, today. Who is this man, and why is his world the one that survived? His name is Hiram. Not the famous king, a merchant, a shipwright and trade negotiator for the Merchant Council of Tyre in the year 841 BC. He is 44 years old, broad-shouldered from 30 years on the docks, and the purple hem on his linen tunic is not an accident. Tyrian purple, the color that would define royalty across the ancient world for the next 1,000 years, cost more per gram than gold. 1 gram required the fluid of 12,000 murex sea snails. Hiram wears it at the hem. Just the hem. Enough to signal that he is not a man you dismiss. Not enough to suggest he is trying to be a king. He is not a king. Tyre has no king with absolute power. It has a merchant council, a harbor, and contracts. Contracts written in a 22-letter alphabet that Hiram's civilization invented, that could be learned in weeks rather than years, that would eventually become the foundation of Greek, Latin, Arabic, and Hebrew. In 841 BC, Assyria, the most powerful military force on earth, is collecting tribute from Tyre, and Tyre is paying it, calmly, because Tyre has already calculated that the Assyrians will eventually be gone. They were right. And that's just the beginning, because the real question is, how does a civilization with no army, no emperor, and no capital city outlast every single empire that ever conquered it? What I want to show you is why an empire with no army, no emperor, and no ruins ended up outlasting every single power that tried to erase it. The Phoenicians made a deliberate architectural choice. While every other civilization in the ancient Mediterranean was building armies, walls, and monuments, the Phoenicians were building something harder to destroy: a network. 30 independent city-states stitched together not by loyalty to a throne, but by trade agreements, a shared alphabet, and a maritime reach that stretched from the coast of Lebanon to the tin mines of Cornwall in Britain. 4,000 kilometers of open ocean, navigated without GPS, without iron warships, without an imperial navy. We are going to watch that network absorb 5 consecutive conquests: Assyrian, Babylonian, Persian, Greek, Roman, and survive every single one. We are going to watch a Phoenician colony called Carthage nearly erase Rome from history. And then, from ashes to insights, we are going to ask the question that should make you slightly uncomfortable. What if the Phoenicians weren't the civilization that lost? What if they were the only one that won? If you leave before the Carthage section, you will miss the moment this story turns into something that doesn't feel like ancient history at all. Let's establish what Phoenicia actually was, because the word empire is exactly wrong, and that wrongness is the whole point. By 1000 BC, the Phoenician city-states, Tyre, Sidon, Byblos, Beirut, Arwad, occupy a narrow strip of the Levantine coast. We're talking about a territory roughly the size of the modern state of Connecticut. No agricultural heartland, no river valley empire. The mountains of Lebanon press down almost to the shoreline, which means the Phoenicians have almost no farmland, almost no interior, and almost no room to expand by land even if they wanted to. So they went the other way. By 900 BC, Phoenician merchant ships are operating regular routes to Cyprus, Sardinia, Sicily, North Africa, and the Iberian Peninsula. By 800 BC, they have founded trading colonies at Carthage, 814 BC to be exact, at Cadiz in Spain, at Utica in Tunisia. These are not conquered territories. They are nodes, waypoints in a supply chain. Each one is semi-independent, governed locally, but economically wired into the same network. Now here is the specific fact that reframes everything you think you know about ancient commerce. The Phoenician alphabet. 22 consonants, no vowels, learnable in a matter of weeks, was not invented as a literary achievement. It was invented as a commercial technology. Before the Phoenician alphabet, the dominant writing systems in the region were Sumerian cuneiform and Egyptian hieroglyphics, systems requiring years of specialist training, scribal castes, royal patronage. You could not run a fast-moving maritime trade network with a writing system that required a priest to decode it. The Phoenicians built a writing system that a harbor merchant could teach his son in a summer, and they shared it, freely. The Greeks adopted it around 800 BC, added vowels, and called it their own. The Greeks passed it to the Romans. The Romans passed it to Europe. The Aramaic branch became Hebrew and Arabic. Every alphabet in use in the world today, Latin, Greek, Arabic, Hebrew, Cyrillic, traces back to that 22-letter Phoenician commercial shorthand. They didn't conquer the world's writing, they open-sourced it. But the alphabet was only one layer. The other layer was the purple. Tyrian purple, extracted from the murex snail off the coast of Tyre and Sidon, was the single most valuable manufactured substance in the ancient Mediterranean. The process was appalling. The snails were crushed, the fluid extracted, treated, and reduced over weeks. The smell was reportedly nauseating for miles around the dye works. But the color was permanent. It did not fade. And the Phoenicians controlled every step of production and trade. By 800 BC, Tyrian purple is the color of kings across the entire Mediterranean world. Egyptian pharaohs wear it. Assyrian nobles wear it. Later, Roman emperors will make it illegal for anyone outside the imperial family to wear it, because purple means Phoenicia, and Phoenicia means a power that doesn't answer to Rome. So by the time the Assyrian Empire begins pressing down on the Levantine coast, seriously pressing militarily, in the 9th century BC, the Phoenicians are operating something that no military strategist of the era has a name for. It isn't a kingdom. It isn't a confederation. It is a distributed commercial network with nodes on 3 continents, a proprietary technology stack, a monopoly on the most valuable luxury good in the known world, and a writing system spreading faster than any army could march. And then Assyria arrives, with actual armies. What happens next is not what you expect. 7 o'clock to 11:30. In 722 BC, the Assyrian king Sargon II conquers Samaria. He is moving down the Levantine coast like a machine, city after city. In 701 BC, Sennacherib besieges Sidon. In 677 BC, Esarhaddon destroys Sidon entirely, burns it, kills its king, deports its population. Sidon, one of the great Phoenician cities, is gone, and the network reroutes. Tyre absorbs Sidon's trade relationships. Sidon's merchants, scattered across the Mediterranean colonies, keep working. The contracts don't die with the city. The alphabet doesn't die with the city. The ships don't stop moving. Tyre pays tribute to Assyria, significant tribute, recorded in Assyrian annals, and keeps operating. The Assyrians take the money and move on. They don't know what to do with a civilization that doesn't have a throne to capture or a capital to burn that would end it. Which brings us back to that harbor office. Back to the man who didn't look up. Remember Hiram in the harbor office negotiating with the Assyrian envoy? The question was, how does his world survive when the empire sending that envoy does not? Here is the partial answer. Because his world was not a place, it was a process. But here's where it gets stranger, because the Babylonians try next. Nebuchadnezzar II, the same king who destroys Jerusalem in 586 BC, besieges Tyre itself starting in 585 BC. The siege lasts 13 years. 13 years. Nebuchadnezzar's army camps outside the walls of Tyre for 13 years and cannot take it, partly because Tyre is built on an island, partly because the Phoenicians supply it by sea, and partly because Tyre's wealth keeps flowing through the network even while the mainland city is under siege. When Tyre finally negotiates terms in 573 BC, it does so from a position of partial strength. The Babylonians get a tribute arrangement. Tyre keeps operating. Then Persia conquers Babylon in 539 BC. The Persians absorb the Phoenician cities and immediately realize something the Assyrians and Babylonians learned the hard way. The Phoenician fleet is the most capable naval force in the eastern Mediterranean. The Persians don't destroy it, they hire it. Phoenician ships form the core of the Persian navy at the Battle of Salamis in 480 BC. The civilization with no army had just become the navy of the largest empire on earth, while simultaneously operating independent trade networks out of Carthage, Cadiz, and Sardinia that the Persians couldn't touch. That is the moment the Phoenician model stops looking like passivity and starts looking like genius. But Alexander the Great is coming, and Alexander does not negotiate. In 332 BC, Alexander of Macedon arrives at Tyre and demands the city's surrender. Tyre refuses, politely, diplomatically, offering terms. Alexander responds by building a causeway across the sea to the island city. A causeway, half a kilometer of stone and timber driven into the Mediterranean to reach a city that had survived Assyria, Babylon, and Persia. The siege lasts 7 months. When Alexander finally breaches the walls, he kills 8,000 Tyrians and sells 30,000 more into slavery. He burns the city. And the network reroutes. Carthage, founded by Tyrian colonists in 814 BC, 500 years before Alexander's siege, is now the largest city in the western Mediterranean. Population, 400,000 people. A harbor capable of holding 220 warships simultaneously. Grain fields across North Africa. Silver mines in Spain. Trade routes to Britain. Alexander destroyed a node. The network was already somewhere else. From ashes to insights, because this is where the story stops being ancient history and starts being a design principle. In 1964, the United States Defense Department commissioned a communications network with a specific engineering requirement. It had to survive a nuclear strike. The solution was ARPANET, a distributed system with no central node, designed so that if any single point was destroyed, traffic would automatically reroute through surviving connections. That network became the Internet. Around 900 BC, the Phoenicians had already figured out what Silicon Valley thinks it invented. Build the network, not the headquarters. Make yourself indispensable, not unmissable. No central capital. No single point of failure. No emperor whose death collapses the system. 30 semi-independent nodes, each capable of functioning alone, each more valuable as part of the network. When Sidon falls, Tyre absorbs. When Tyre falls, Carthage continues. When Carthage falls in 146 BC, and we'll get to that, the Phoenician alphabet is already inside every civilization on Earth. Now here is the modern number that should make you stop. As of 2024, the 5 largest companies by market capitalization, Apple, Microsoft, NVIDIA, Alphabet, Amazon, are not manufacturers of physical goods. They are network operators, platform builders. Their value is not in territory they control, but in connections they facilitate. The combined GDP of the countries that, quote, host these companies is irrelevant to the company's reach. Apple's revenue in fiscal year 2023 was $383 billion, larger than the GDP of 150 individual nations. And Apple has no army. The Carthage chapter runs from ashes to something more violent, because the Phoenician network, when it finally chose to consolidate, when Carthage stopped being a trading post and became an empire, produced Hannibal Barca. In 218 BC, Hannibal leads an army of 90,000 soldiers and 37 war elephants across the Alps in winter, a logistical feat that military historians still analyze, and defeats Rome in 3 consecutive battles. At Cannae in 216 BC, he kills 70,000 Roman soldiers in a single afternoon. 70,000 in one day. The largest military defeat in Roman history, delivered by the colony of a civilization Rome thought it understood. The Romans were so traumatized that for the next century, the phrase "Hannibal is at the gates," Hannibal ante portas, was used to describe existential panic. It became a Roman idiom for the worst thing you could imagine. A civilization with no standing army, no emperor, and no imperial capital had, through its colony, produced the general who nearly ended Rome. And here is the thing that should unsettle you. We are building distributed networks right now. In 2023, decentralized finance protocols processed $1.1 trillion in transactions without a central bank, without a government, without a headquarters that could be bombed or sanctioned. Blockchain networks operate across 190 countries simultaneously. No single government can shut them down because, like the Phoenician trade network, there is no single node to destroy. The question is not whether this architecture is powerful. The Phoenicians answered that question 3,000 years ago. The question is what happens when a distributed network decides, like Carthage, that it's ready to consolidate. We don't know the answer yet. That man in the harbor office never built a monument. He didn't need one. He built something the Assyrians couldn't garrison, the Babylonians couldn't burn, and the Romans couldn't quite figure out how to kill. A way of doing things that spread faster than any army could march. Bone stylus in hand, papyrus under his arm, negotiating with an envoy from an empire that no longer exists. He wasn't afraid of the Assyrians. He was writing in an alphabet that would outlast them. He was shipping cargo on routes that would outlast them. He was building, contract by contract, a civilization that didn't need walls because it had already decided that the network was the fortress. Every empire that conquered the Phoenicians is dust. The letters you are reading right now are Phoenician. The most durable power in history was never the kind that could be seen from a distance. It was the kind that was already everywhere before anyone thought to stop it. If the Phoenician model is the template, distributed, networked, impossible to decapitate, then the next question is obvious. Carthage chose to become an empire, and Rome destroyed it so completely that the phrase, "Carthage must be destroyed," Carthago delenda est, became a Roman political obsession for decades before they finally did it. Cato the Elder reportedly ended every single speech he gave in the Roman Senate with that phrase. Every speech, regardless of topic. Rome didn't just defeat Carthage, it salted the earth, erased the name, and then spent the next 100 years quietly borrowing everything Carthage knew. So next time, why does the winner always end up looking like the loser it destroyed? That story is next.